Hi, everyone. Welcome back. This screencast is about the characteristics of life. Very important topic in biology class since biology is the study of life. So let's dive into what does it mean to actually be considered living or alive. We're going to learn that there are 8 major characteristics, and we're going to go through each one of these 8. So don't worry about writing them down right now. First thing I want to review is what does it actually mean to be living? We're going to learn that in order to be considered living, you must meet all 8 characteristics. So living things are able to meet all 8 characteristics. Non-living things do not meet all 8 characteristics, and dead things at one time met all 8 characteristics, but currently does not. Right, so let's go through these 8 characteristics. Characteristic number 1 is that all living things are composed of cells. You guys should have learned about cells before. They are the smallest unit capable of performing all of life's functions. And we divide all organisms into either unicellular organisms or multicellular organisms. Unicellular organisms would be examples like bacteria and protists, and the entire organism is within that one cell. While they can colonize and work together as a group, each cell is individual. Multicellular organisms, like us, are made up of many cells, which means that each of the cells is specialized. So, our skin cells are specialized for a specific function, our brain cells are specialized for a different function. So, cell specialization happens in multicellular organisms. Our second characteristics of life is that all things reproduce. Makes sense. If we are living, we need to make more living things. So, reproduction is that process where we make new organisms of the same species. There's 2 types of reproduction. There's asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction is when we have one parent that makes an identical copy of itself. In bacteria, we call this binary fission. In different types of asexual organisms, we call this budding. But we'll learn about each of those as we go through a unit this year. Sexual reproduction is when we have 2 parents. They both contribute one sex cell that has genetic information inside of them. Humans and these adorable little penguins both go through sexual reproduction to make babies. We'll learn that asexual reproduction is faster, it requires less energy, but the downside is that we do not increase genetic variation. Sexual reproduction is way more expensive energy wise. It takes a lot longer. However, it does allow us to have different genetic combinations, which is very good for our population. Third characteristic is that all living things obtain and use energy. So this adorable little otter here is eating a crab or a crayfish, and he's obtaining energy that was previously stored in the tissue of the organism that he's eating. And we'll learn about how energy transfers and flows through ecosystems and food chains. But organisms use that energy to grow, repair, and reproduce. Fourth characteristics of life is that all organisms regulate body levels. And we summarize this entire characteristics of life into one word. That is called homeostasis. We're going to be talking about this a lot this year. It is the process by which organisms keep their internal body conditions stable. So I like to think of this as balance. So our body temperature we keep stable. For example, if you walk outside and it's very, very hot out, your body will try to cool off by sweating or by dilating some of the blood vessels near your skin so that it can diffuse some of that heat into your outside environment. Your blood volume, so heaven forbid, but if you would get cut and you'd lose a lot of blood, you would restore that blood by creating new blood cells from your bone marrow. Your pH balance, so every time you breathe in or out, your blood will actually change pH. So that's the acidity or alkalinity of your blood. And you have different things called buffers in your blood that will help you kind of keep balance within your blood. Water balance is a very good example. Also, if you would go chug a whole bunch of bottles of water, a couple hours later, you're going to have to pee. So we keep our water balance in our body, all the fluids that we need, the external fluids within our cells. That's all balanced through this process called homeostasis. So we'll talk a lot about that this year. Characteristic number 5, all living things respond to stimuli. So, for example, a plant's leaves and stems will always grow towards the light. So, if you have a house plant sitting on a windowsill, if you leave it alone for a week and then you come back, you're going to notice that all of the leaves have slowly over time turned to face the light source. It's called phototrophism, and that's a stimuli that they can respond to. So, light, things like temperature, odor, sound, gravity, heat, water pressure, these are all stimuli. If you're living, you're going to respond to that stimuli. Characteristic number six, all living things grow and develop. Now, we consider this to be one characteristic, but growth and development are actually two separate things. So, here in this picture, we can see a little baby elephant with its mom. Growth means to physically get bigger in size. And we'll learn this year that when you grow, your cells that you have as a baby do not get bigger. Your cells stay the same size, but you simply get more of them over time. So if you would count the number of cells in that mama elephant, you'd get trillions of cells. And if you'd count the cells in the baby elephant, that baby elephant's going to have a lot less than its mom. But that's growth, just physically bigger in size, but the same overall body form. Development is a little bit different. That's a change in your physical form or physiological makeup. So, a great example of that would be the metamorphosis of a lot of bugs from a larva or a pupal stage into their adult bug stage. So, a butterfly would be a great example of a development. And that would be a physical or physiological change. So, all living things grow and develop. Number seven, all living things adapt to their environment. We sometimes say that this characteristic is adaptation and evolution. So, adaptation, remember, is a process that enables an organism to be better suited to their environment. Remember that species obtain adaptations through evolution. So, the adaptation is the thing, evolution is the process in which adaptations can arise. A great thing to remember with this is that an adaptation is not a change that can happen in one generation. So, in the lifetime of an animal cannot adapt. These are genetic changes that happen over entire eras or epochs. So, we're talking millions of years that this would happen in. A great example of an adaptation would be that over millions of years, dry desert plants have developed this thick, waxy cuticle around their leaves. So, succulents typically have very thick leaves, and that helps them to reduce the amount of water loss so that they can store more water in that very arid environment. Another second, very, very common example is that over millions of years, the giraffe's neck has gotten longer as the food source that they have eaten has risen higher and higher and higher. So that adaptation has proved useful, and therefore it has been evolved, or it evolved over millions of years. Last one, characteristic number eight. So all living things have a genetic code. That genetic code can either be DNA or RNA. The more common one that we'll talk about this year is DNA, and how DNA stores a molecular code that will eventually be transcribed into RNA, and that RNA will eventually be translated into a protein. We call this entire process the central dogma of biology, and you're going to get to know this very, very well throughout this year of biology. So all of this can be summarized into the eight characteristics of life. Remember, this is important as a biologist because when we walk up to a blob in the middle of the forest and we want to know, hey, is this blob living? Is this blob non-living? Or is this blob dead? We simply run it through the test of the eight characteristics of life, which means you need to make yourself a memorization technique to remember all eight. If you can't remember all eight, it doesn't prove to be very useful because we can't run it through the characteristics of life test. So what I'm going to encourage you to do between now and when I see you again in class is come up with a memorization technique or a mnemonic, an acronym perhaps, to help you memorize all eight of those characteristics. Hope this was helpful. See you in class.